Lamar Jackson responded to some of the criticism that he's been taking after the firing of John Harbaugh, and Lamar is right.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. Thank you to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage here on Locked On Ravens. And, of course, we're going to have a jam-packed episode today because, man, the Ravens are the talk of town. John Harbaugh's out. Their head coaching search is crazy. But we're going to talk head coach search, but we're going to do that in the second part of the show. In the first part of the show, we're going to dive into Lamar Jackson responding to some criticism that he has been facing over John Harbaugh's firing, which I personally think the criticism for Lamar is ridiculous here. But Lamar responded to it actually a couple of days ago, and that's what these bonus episodes are for here on the weekends. Kind of talk about the news that either I didn't see during the week or that we didn't have time to talk about during the week. So it's a good way for us to get that information and talk about that information here. So we'll talk Lamar Jackson responding in the first part of the show. The Ravens head coaching search continues, some new names in the second part of the show. And then we'll actually have Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings join us to talk Brian Flores in the final parts of the show. Today's bonus episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. All right, Lamar Jackson response. Now, this was a couple of days ago, like I mentioned. Actually, I think it was on his birthday that this happened. Lamar posted a picture, or a montage of pictures on Instagram of his year. You know, just the caption, year 8 with, hands and a couple of heart emojis, purple and black for the Ravens. And there was no picture of John Harbaugh. Now, obviously, John Harbaugh got fired the day before Lamar Jackson's birthday. And, everyone was kind of scrolling through these pictures, and I guess they noticed that there were no pictures of Ravens coaches, no pictures of John Harbaugh. And, Lamar didn't put out any formal statement or something like that. And, there were also pictures that other players posted, and Ravens players were commenting under it with like emojis and video game emojis and joystick emojis and stuff. And the players took a lot of flack for that because some players did post messages for John, and not like super long ones, but Marlon Humphrey was one, Brent Urban was another, a few other guys did too. But Lamar didn't make like a formal post, at least not to my knowledge, and maybe I missed it, but at least to my knowledge, Lamar didn't make one. And so people have been criticizing Lamar for that, which, again, I think personally is ridiculous. No player is obligated to do that. Like, you can say something, you don't have to say something publicly. But, there was a comment on the post that Lamar had for his birthday, and that comment said, "Not one picture with Harbs speaks volumes." And I think, again, people kind of took the no Harbaugh picture thing as, oh, does Lamar hate Harbaugh? Like, what's going on here? This, that, and the other. Someone else responded to that comment saying, quote, "It's crazy to me you make up a narrative in your own head and believe it. LOL, what's not posting a picture with his coach that just got fired have to do with Lamar not messing with him?" And Lamar then responded to that and said, quote, "Because they're too invested, like me and coach don't have each other's number." And with a laughing emoji. And so that's the thing, right? I'm sure Lamar texted John Harbaugh after the fact. I mean, there have been, Charlie Kohler went on the Ryan Ripken show, and I was a part of that interview with Charlie. And, he had said that, like, he shot John Harbaugh a text and, talked a lot about John, said that he has a lot of respect for him. Charlie Kohler did. And, not everything has to be said in a public space. I know that's the world we're in today, social media. And, if you don't say something publicly, if you really said it at all, I think it's kind of the mindset here. But that's not fair, especially in the world of sports where, yeah, guess what? Lamar Jackson has John Harbaugh's number. And I'm sure that he did text him. And that's not information Lamar has to share. And Lamar shouldn't get criticism for that. It's up to Lamar whether he wants to post John Harbaugh or not. I don't think it shows anything about Lamar's character. I mean, it's another reaching narrative, in my opinion, in a pile of Lamar Jackson narratives that you can say, oh, that's such a reach, or this is such a reach. And again, like, somehow like Lamar Jackson is getting this blame for John Harbaugh getting fired, like he was the problem. And look, I'll tell you this, for the Ravens season this year, everybody had a part to play in that, right? But there's context behind everything, right? John had a part to play in it. Lamar had a part to play in it. Derek DeCosta had a part to play in it. Everybody, literally, Zach Orr, Todd Monken, every player, Zay and his fumbles, or Eric Henry had his fumbles. Some of the defensive guys couldn't wrap up sacks or dropped interceptions. Like, everybody has a part to play. But the cool thing about Lamar is that he'll tell you when he messes up. He'll tell you, hey, I didn't do this well, I didn't do that well. Like, yeah, I need to be better here. Lamar's taken on that leadership role, which I think is really cool. But, it's one thing to criticize someone for their play on the football field. And there's so much context behind Lamar's season, obviously, with the injuries and how he got injured and the O-line play and whatnot. And again, Lamar wasn't perfect this year. And again, Lamar will be the first to tell you that. We're like, I'm sure he wishes he played better in certain spots. He's admitted he wanted to play better in certain spots. He also had a lot of awesome moments this season. He still, even with the injuries, found a way and had plenty of vintage Lamar moments that I'm sure people doubted he could have after he suffered all those injuries. But Lamar is very vocal about, this was the first time he was kind of going through something like this and managing all this stuff. So, I've come on here for years and said, look, it's okay to criticize someone for their play on the football field when they don't make a play or they have a turnover or they can't tackle somebody or, a coach for calling a bad play or whatnot. But I do not know one quarterback that is being talked about like this, and I don't know one quarterback that continues to be talked like this, where this is not just a one-off thing. Like, this is the conversation behind Lamar Jackson. And so actually there was a very interesting development, something I personally like, and I think, kind of provides some added context to everything that's going on here. Because look, there were a lot of guys, and I saw it on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, of saying like, oh, Lamar not posting about John Harbaugh, super unprofessional and all this stuff. To me, it's really not that deep. Like, again, we can just kind of put it to bed as like Lamar, I'm sure, texted John. I'm sure they had a private conversation or they had a private exchange or whatever it was. And, when Lamar has the opportunity to speak on John, in a public setting, if it's an interview or, a media setting or whatnot, I'm sure Lamar will say a lot of cool things about John. And that to me that's the timing of it. I'm not super pressed over it, but there is an account. If you haven't heard of the account, it's Lamar Jackson Entertainment. And this account, at least from what I've put together, is associated with Lamar. And I'm putting together as a part of Lamar's team, at least. And, it's the entertainment-based entity specializing in media and music with, Lamar is in the bio there, and Truz Productions, essentially, with, a lot of Lamar stuff with the LJ Rights and Play Action Soul and Air 8 Apparel and whatnot. So that account has started to become a lot more active in, dispelling some rumors about Lamar Jackson, sticking up for Lamar Jackson. And again, like, I think it's really, like, honestly, I like it. Like, I think this is a really cool thing here because we know Lamar doesn't have an agent. And I don't care if Lamar has an agent or not. That's Lamar's decision and his team's decision. Like, people make a huge deal about it. I do think that, like, sure, if Lamar had an agent, maybe there's less stuff that gets leaked or, he's able to combat those stories more. But other than that, like, I don't care if Lamar has an agent or not. Like, I don't think it's a huge deal. I know a lot of people do, but I personally don't. But this is a way to combat those narratives where we see the account where there have been some reports about how things went down between, Lamar and Todd Monken or Lamar and John Harbaugh or Lamar Jackson in general with this Ravens team. And this account, Lamar Jackson Entertainment, has essentially, started to refute those where they've, pushed back on the Harbaugh, didn't have a problem with Lamar. The issue was between Jackson and Todd Monken. So they pushed back on the whole, that narrative in one of the tweets that was posted by a reporter that's been following the situation. And, even with some of the other stuff with Lamar and Monken, the account has refuted that as well. And to come into Lamar's defense. And like, again, with this, we've seen Lamar have to come to his own defense a lot on social media, and I don't have a problem with Lamar defending himself. I actually think it's really good. Again, people hate it for some reason, or at least some people do. I think it's cool, like, now it's not cool that Lamar has to come on and defend himself against that stuff and the stuff that is being said about him because, it shouldn't be being said in the first place. But like, I think it's correct for Lamar to want to defend himself on social media. I don't find it unprofessional. I don't find it weird. Like that's cool to me. Like it's cool to see Lamar come on there and defend himself. But this is a way, I think, for Lamar's team, assuming this again is a part of Lamar's team, which I think it is, I'm pretty sure it is, to kind of combat this stuff and say, hey, no, well, and without pulling behind the curtain too much, right? They're not going to give you everything. At least I don't think so. But, this to me is kind of essentially Lamar's defense team, right? Where he hasn't really had something like that, where he's had his close people who support him. And we know that Lamar's group is very tight knit, and that it's like that's his group right there. And you're not going to get a lot of information. Guys are very tight lipped in there. They want to keep everything in the inner circle. And again, I don't have a problem with that, but I think in some cases, like a lot of team sourced information can come out, and without an agent for Lamar, without that defense team or whatnot, there's not a lot of rebuttal to it unless Lamar comes out and says something himself. So if this continues on, and I have no reason to believe it won't, I think that, this could be something that continues to go on. So it's interesting in that aspect as well about kind of how Lamar is going to navigate things. It's obviously a big offseason for him with his cap hit being so big. And is that going to result in an extension or restructure, or how is that all going to go? So, this is a new era for Baltimore, and with Lamar's name being New Era 8, that's it's kind of fitting, I guess. But there's a lot, especially with the Todd Monken interview that happened on Thursday. Todd Monken is spelling a lot of the rumors from Lamar and Todd and everything that those two's relationship was, and we're never going to know the full story probably. But again, I feel like there is a lot about Lamar that goes unchecked. And I do my best here on this show to try to check as much as I can and, come to Lamar's defense as much as I can about this stuff. It's just so out of left field. Like, again, I have no problem coming on here when Lamar has a bad game and saying Lamar has a bad game. And that's fine, because every player, when they deserve to be praised over a football game, yeah, we're going to praise them. When they deserve to have criticism, yeah, we're going to criticize them. That's just the nature of sports. But it becomes far too personal with Lamar far too often. There are too many reaches out of left field far too often that tries to disrespect and honestly slander Lamar Jackson's name. And that, to me, again, you never hear any quarterback talked about like that. And I think, again, this Lamar Jackson entertainment account and everything that they have going on, essentially refuting some of these rumors and reports and coming to Lamar's defense, I think that's a really cool thing. And hopefully it continues. Coming up in the second part of the show, though, we will talk about the Ravens head coaching search, more names on the docket, more interviews completed, and a lot more questions. So stay tuned. Plenty coming up on Locked On Ravens. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today. Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Moving along here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this bonus Saturday edition of the show. Appreciate everybody for being here. Hopefully you're enjoying your weekend. Unfortunately, no Ravens football this weekend as they are out of the postseason. And man, a lot has happened. It's honestly still crazy to me to think that less than a week ago, we were sitting here on a Saturday edition of the show talking about, man, tomorrow the Ravens play for the AFC North. And now here we are less than a week later. John Harbaugh's fired. The entire staff is essentially out. There's been all this drama, and Ravens already completing head coaching interviews. So it's crazy how not even time flies, but how quickly things change, especially in the NFL landscape. So again, we're 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens. We have our regular show Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. Even in the offseason, we're a year-round show here. Yesterday was episode 1,680 consecutively here for me on Locked On Ravens. I've never missed a show. It's taken over in 2019. We also have bonus episodes on the weekend when there are headlines, and obviously big headlines with the John Harbaugh news and head coaching search and whatnot. We also have instant reactions after big news and after games when there are games. We have watch-alongs during the season for games, and Locked On Ravens squad show twice a week. Myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. But all right, Ravens head coaching search continues to heat up. A lot of names and a lot of interviews. So the Ravens have already officially interviewed 4 candidates. Vance Joseph, the D coordinator in Denver. Then you have Davis Webb, the quarterbacks coach in Denver. Those were a couple days ago. Now the Ravens interviewed a couple of guys on Friday with Clint Kubiak. He officially completed his interview, the Seattle offensive coordinator. He's a very popular pick. I like him as well. And then out of left field, because there was no reporting on this whatsoever, the news dropped when the Ravens put out the interview tweet. It was Kevin Stefanski, the former Browns head coach, which honestly, to me, from a football perspective, I like Kevin Stefanski a little more than other people do. I feel like there's a lot of mixed reviews on Kevin Stefanski, but, he took that Browns team to the postseason. And, look, taking the Browns to the postseason is an accomplishment. But I don't know, and especially if he brought a Jim Schwartz over, Stefanski, Schwartz, and then, maybe McDaniel does come to be the OC. Stefanski, McDaniel, and Schwartz. Honestly, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. And again, if you have any opinions on the head coaching battle or any names that you feel like will be good, be sure to put the links in the description down below. And actually, we just did our Q&A, our weekly Q&A for the Everydayer Club. And if you want to be a part of the Everydayer Club, be sure you check out the link in the description below for the extra add-on content we do offer here on Locked On Ravens. But we had our Q&A, and I was asked a question about, well, who do you think is going to be the guy? And I'd mentioned Stefanski. To me personally, I feel like the Jesse Minter train is going to pick up steam. At the time of this recording, there's been no request to interview for Jesse Minter, but, I could see one of these brighter young minds, like a Kubiak or a Minter, being one of the finalists. So essentially what the Ravens have done so far, so they've only been on this head coaching search for a couple of days, but it has honestly kind of moved pretty quickly, all things considered. But Baltimore, double-digit coordinators, or I guess coaching candidates, a lot of them being coordinators, some being former head coaches. Cliff Kingsbury, former Washington offensive coordinator. Robert Saleh, DC for the San Francisco 49ers. Brian Flores, Minnesota defensive coordinator, who, again, we'll talk to Luke Braun in the final part of the show of Locked On Vikings about Brian Flores. Matt Nagy, who is the Chiefs offensive coordinator. And then Davis Webb and Vance Joseph, like we talked about. Anthony Weaver, Dolphins defensive coordinator. Joe Brady is one of the new names. He was requested by Baltimore on Friday. Bills offensive coordinator, and then Clint Kubiak and Kevin Stefanski, like we just talked about. So, look, I like it that the Ravens are putting out a wide net for their coaching search. Now, I think it's interesting because you do have a couple of former failed head coaches here in Vance Joseph and Matt Nagy. There's obviously context behind those two. I don't really like Matt Nagy as an option here for the Ravens. He's not, him and Cliff Kingsbury, not great to me. Now, there's been a lot of steam about potential pairings for coaching openings across the league. Because again, we have to remember, I believe the number is that 25%, a quarter of the league is currently looking for new head coaches. And let's be honest about this. There could be 3 more openings after this weekend. The Steelers, the Bills, and the Packers are the 3 that everybody's talking about right now. I assume not all of them will actually be open, but I'd probably assume at least one of those 3 teams moves on. I think the most likely to, if they lose, is probably Buffalo, and that's a hot take sleeper destination for me for John Harbaugh. I don't think it actually happens, but I wouldn't be shocked if they fire Bean and Sean McDermott after that game. Maybe Harbaugh goes there, but regardless, the Weaver thing is interesting because, Weaver also was a head coach and that didn't really work out. Flores, obviously, he didn't work out. So actually a lot more former failed head coaches. Even a guy like Robert Saleh in New York and stuff. And there's context, again, there's context behind Flores. There's context behind Saleh. There's context behind Vance Joseph, some of the quarterbacks that he had. And again, we can dive into all those details and we will over the course of the next couple of days. But to me, I want to compare what the Ravens' history has been recently. I'm going to just point to the last 2 coordinator searches this team had. And there's context behind those as well. But if you remember, when they hired Todd Monken back in 2023, that was a very wide search. A lot of names, a lot of requests, a lot of interviews, and they took their time with that. And I think that they hired the right man. I think Todd Monken is the second best coordinator in Ravens history, only behind Gary Kubiak. And I know that now you get, maybe if Clint comes, would Gary come back? I'm not sure. I don't know what Gary's up to these days or what his situation is like, but yeah, I wouldn't mind that. Maybe senior offensive assistant Gary Kubiak alongside Clint. I'm just saying. But regardless of that, that was the right decision of putting out a wide net, casting a wide search, and making sure that you're going over every single option. Now, the thing with the Zach Orr hire 2 years ago was that they didn't have time to do that. It was rushed, in my opinion, where the Ravens were losing coordinators or coaches, assistant coaches left and right. And, Mike McDonald, he went to Seattle, and then, Anthony Weaver goes to Miami, Denard Wilson, he goes to Tennessee, and all of a sudden the Ravens are scrambling. It's like, man, we got to keep one of these guys. And, there were rumors that Zach Orr was going to go to Seattle or, go to Green Bay, and the Ravens are like, all right, you're going to be the guy. And I guess that was the guy they said they had tabbed. But, regardless of that situation, this to me is the right choice for this Ravens head coach situation. You cast a wide net, you make sure you get as many options in the building as possible. And I think they're doing that, where even if you don't want to hire these guys, and I think the Ravens are giving these guys a chance, but regardless of the guys you don't hire, you can use what they say in these interviews about, hey, I really liked what Kevin Stefanski said about running the offense a little bit here. Or, Vance Joseph said this really cool tidbit about the defense that maybe we can implement. And that's kind of what teams do, is like they pick the brains of all these guys and say, well, how would you do this? What's your vision? How would you run the team? What do you think about X, Y, Z? And I think that's a really cool strategy. So you can kind of apply those things, use them, but it's going to be a hard reset in Baltimore system wise and, everything. So I'm excited for it. But again, there's a lot that still has to happen here with this head coaching search, and we will continue to have you covered on it on Locked On Ravens. Coming up, though, we're going to dive into a conversation with Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings about Brian Flores, a potential Ravens head coaching candidate. So stay tuned. Plenty coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The wildcard round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode every game day during the NFL playoffs. FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boosts give you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet something new. Every play feels bigger. The boosts make your bets feel that way too. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. And the show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Let's be real, managing your finances can feel overwhelming between subscriptions you forgot about, bills that keep going up, and trying to figure out where all your money actually goes each month. It's easy to feel like you're losing control. And who has time to track every transaction or hunt down hidden fees? That's where Rocket Money comes in, the personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I was shocked when Rocket Money showed me I was paying for a lot of subscriptions that I had completely forgot about. It's already saved me money. I love how it tracks all my subscriptions and lets me cancel them right in the app with just a few taps. No more hunting down customer service numbers. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on the Saturday bonus edition of the show. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. If you have a friend or a family member who's a Ravens fan or wants daily Ravens coverage year-round, we are here for them, just like we're for you on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to spread the word about the show. We're building up awesome communities, video form, audio form, social media. We have it all. You can follow me on social media, by the way, at CashTracker34. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. Also, we're trying the Facebook thing out this year, so be sure to follow me on Facebook as well at Kevin Oestreicher. But let's now dive into our conversation with Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. Obviously, Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator in Minnesota. The Ravens request to interview him. Time of this recording, the only interview request Brian Flores has. So I talked to Luke about what Brian Flores could bring to the table in Baltimore. Brian Flores is one of the names that the Baltimore Ravens have requested to interview Vikings defensive coordinator. And so I thought, hey, who better to talk about Brian Flores as someone who knows Brian Flores and what he runs in Minnesota, how he is in Minnesota. That is Luke Braun, the host of Locked On Vikings. And Luke, Brian Flores is one of the more intriguing head coaching candidates, just coaching candidates in general in this entire cycle. The Ravens requesting to interview him and planning to interview him, which I think is intriguing considering that, as we talked about on your show, Locked On Vikings, he was the one who orchestrated that 2021 Miami Dolphins cover zero plan against Lamar Jackson. And I mean, obviously since then, Lamar has figured it out, but it was a big storyline heading into that game Minnesota and Baltimore played early this season about Brian Flores, the aggressive nature of defense, how Lamar would handle that. So from your perspective in Minnesota, just very generally, can you give us an idea what type of defense does he run? What style of defense does he like? How aggressive is he? Although I think I can answer that part of the question already.
Well, you guys remember Wink Martindale and this idea, like, you know, the Ravens blitz and they blitz and they blitz and they blitz. And it would be very similar. Flores blitzes. It's a different kind of blitz. It's a different kind of vibe. The thing about Flores that makes it special is that he uses a lot of zone coverage behind the blitzes beyond just what you may know if you play a lot of Madden, fire zone with 3 deep defenders, 3 underneath defenders, and you send 5 in all kinds of different ways. There's 5-man coverages, 6-man coverages. They use a quarter structure, cover 2 structures. They love to bring everybody up to the line of scrimmage, and I'm sure you've seen that, you know, Vikings games. You saw that when the Vikings played the Ravens. Everybody up on the line of scrimmage, who's coming, who's isn't, and that whole, you know, a lot of simulated pressure. But really the key difference with Flores is using zone coverage behind blitzes, where most teams, if they're blitzing, they're going to keep their 5 cover men and say, okay, we're in man-to-man coverage here, and everybody's got to hold up, and we're sending a whole bunch of guys.
I think it's interesting, too, because we saw, you mentioned Martindale and how he blitzed a ton. You know,
right.
when Mike
he
McDonald,
would play man behind the blitzes like everybody else.
Yes. And when Mike McDonald replaced him, it was more, you know, he didn't abandon blitzing, but it was much more strategic. He wasn't blitzing as much. Baltimore's pressure rates and blitz rates kind of dropped a little bit. Now, 2023, they were incredible under Mike McDonald, but you saw those rates start to go down a little bit. And then with Zach Orr, those rates were in the gutter. They were like third to last in blitz percentage. It kind of crept up, but that was more based off necessity because they had to try something. But with the personnel that Baltimore has, obviously Kyle Hamilton's a unicorn. I think any defensive-minded coach would love to work with him. You know, you have guys like Nate Wiggins. You need some in the pass rusher department there. How do you think he would work with what Baltimore currently has personnel-wise? And do you think that they would need anything else with what Brian Flores would want to do if he did become the head coach in Baltimore?
Yeah, so Kyle Hamilton is the one that comes to mind immediately. Flores has used Josh Metellus, and I would say that's the role that Hamilton would have, where he roams all the way around the formation. You've probably seen some of the like viral pictures from broadcasts where he's played everything from defensive end to outside corner. But he is basically a safety linebacker hybrid, I would call it, where he can kind of play all of these positions. If a guy gets injured, like he'll just be the will linebacker that day. But in the ideal world, he plays as an overhang a lot. They love to do that with the safety. So you can expect a lot of like Kyle Hamilton blitzing a ton. You could expect a lot of Alohi Gilman blitzing a ton. And what it does in a big way is because there's so much blitzing and there's so much zone coverage behind that blitzing, it really takes a lot of pressure off the cornerbacks. So the Vikings have not had very serious cornerback rooms. I like Byron Murphy. The rest of it has been a lot of cast-offs, a lot of cheap guys, 1-year deals, old guys, like Stephon Gilmore in the twilight of his career. And they haven't been asked. They're not being asked to do what the Browns asked Denzel Ward to do. They're not manning guys up and I'm going to shadow and we're going to take on your dude. It's a much bigger hole. So there's a lot less emphasis in team building in Minnesota on the corners. They have not invested in that position very much to my chagrin, because I think it's a problem anyways. But rather they've invested in these versatile Swiss Army knife players like Josh Metellus, who Flores actually inherited, but found that he could handle all of this, and Andrew Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner. Eric Wilson has even been that this year as kind of a veteran guy that just knows his way enough around the formations and his way around a defense, not to mention Harrison Smith. Those guys are really what makes it sing, because you never have any idea what those guys are doing. They could feasibly be rushing. They could be up there as part of the run fit. They could be stunting. They could be backing into a coverage. They could be backing into a special coverage. That's what makes it so hard. And what like if you ask quarterbacks, the problem with Flores' defense is all of your pre-snap information is useless. So against younger quarterbacks, that becomes lethal, because the way that you, like if you're a young quarterback and you're not processing as fast as Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers do, then you're going to have to use and lean on pre-snap information to kind of cheat it. You go, okay, that's a too high shell. It's probably cover 2. And you can kind of cheat that way. But by removing all of that information from the quarterback, they have to read it straight up. And that's why really the only teams that have been able to move the ball on the Vikings defense in the last 3 years have been like Jared Goff Lions, Matthew Stafford Rams, guys with a little bit more veteran experience that can read a defense as it declares and don't need that help pre-snap.
From a very general perspective, and I mean, you just talked about it a little bit there, but if you had to make like a bullet point of 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses that are very much like general, and you can get into specifics if you want to as well. It can be on-field stuff. It can be culture stuff. It can be personality, whatever it is with Brian Flores. I mean, what do you kind of go to there?
Yeah, so all the players have loved him. There's been, I mean, who knows what's going on behind the scenes that we haven't heard about, but from what we know from public information, it's been very highly motivated. These guys have loved playing for Flores, and they play hard for Flores. He challenges them. My understanding of Flores' kind of growth here is that what happened in Miami and him becoming a dictator and all that stuff, that is an experience that he learned from. He went to Pittsburgh for a year as the linebackers coach, and what he saw was the way Mike Tomlin was working with, at the time it was Kenny Pickett, a young struggling quarterback, and the way that Mike Tomlin worked with him as a defensive-minded head coach, how he was able to try to get the best out of Kenny Pickett, even though that guy didn't have the juice at all, and how he approached that was so much different than what Flores had always known with coaching, where you got to light them up. You got to motivate them. You got to, if they don't do the right thing, you got to let them know, and you got to be in no uncertain terms. And Tomlin was a lot gentler about it. And he saw how well that could work. And I mean, there's nobody better in the league at managing different kinds of personalities, is the way I'll put it, than the Steelers and Mike Tomlin. And he's done it forever, right? I think that experience, and then bringing that to Minnesota, not having the pressure of being a head coach, and just saying, these are my guys, this is what we do, and having a bunch of his guys in there, like Andrew Van Ginkel that comes over from Miami, and other people that he's liked and asked for, like Isaiah Rodgers. He is a different kind of, like, he's not suddenly a softie by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the stuff that kind of undid him in Miami is, like, he's grown. He's learned that lesson, I would say.
And I know a lot of people here in Baltimore, Luke, they want a coach who is going to be a leader of men, someone to fire him up and have that passion and energy around him. And, it seems like Flores would fit the bill there in terms of what he can bring to the table. After everything we've talked about, and I just want to get your general opinion on it, like, do you think that, because again, there are a lot of directions Baltimore could go here. They could go with the young, bright offensive mind, young, bright defensive mind. You could go with an even more established option than a Brian Flores. Do you think that Brian Flores would be the right option for the Ravens if he were to get hired and that was a decision they made as their head coach?
Oh, I think it's a fantastic fit. I'm like super scared about it. Yeah. I think the personnel is a fit. I think the organization is a fit. What matters to Brian Flores is, stability and ownership. He doesn't want to get Stephen Ross again. He doesn't want to go into he's not going to take a job with the Jets. And I would say that if I were, the Browns looking for a head coach or the Raiders looking for a head coach, I would be a little worried about the reputations there and how it's going to affect what Brian Flores thinks of you. But also Flores doesn't exactly get his pick of the litter too, because there are teams that won't touch him, including the Giants and Dolphins, but anybody else that's bothered by the fact that he's got a racial discrimination lawsuit against, like, your friend because all the owners are buddies. Like, that's something that also has to not bother you. But if they can all get through that, if Brian Flores gets into Baltimore, I think the hard-nosed defense fits the vibe of Baltimore a lot. The personnel that is already in place is pretty awesome for what he can do and what he wants to do. I think it would be an awesome fit.
Luke is great. Be sure to check him out over at Locked On Vikings, here, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So I have you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We'll see if there's a bonus episode tomorrow. If there are headlines, we will have it. But if not, we're going to be back on Monday. And we're definitely going to be back here on Monday talking all things Ravens. So be sure to, again, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form for that 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.